Happy Monday. It was a full work day for me. What about for you guys? Did you have a big day or a normal day? Are you back to school? Was it easy? Was it difficult? But I decided we're so close to being done. I wanted to get one more chapter in. So I know you've had a big day of thinking and school and learning. And if y'all did this for summer reading, you are behind because we're not done. Hey, Suhani, what are you doing so late? I didn't expect anybody to be here, but I just wanted to read. So let's read. You want to read with me? We're in chapter 13, and this one is called 52. Hi, Maya. Hi, Ellie. So many people on. I'm surprised. So this has gotten really good, and it's all coming together. We know all the big story of why Madame Defarge is so vengeful. I like having a little company. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, how many of you did your exercise today? I did my yoga today. I enjoyed it. It was a different yoga routine today, and I liked it. A lot of cross-body work and some interesting moves I hadn't done before. So I really enjoyed that. The stretching made me feel much better, changed my mental perspective. Hey, Farid. So I really encourage those of you that are struggling with the pandemic, struggling with maybe being a little depressed about school, overwhelmed about school, worried about school. If you're not in a good mental place, do some movements. If it's not yoga, go for a walk, go for a swim, go bounce the basketball, go put on some music and dance. Do something physical that makes you feel better, not just shove ice cream in your face, chocolate chip cookie dough, not just call the girls and gossip and complain and not cut or hurt, self-harm, not you jewel or, if you're drinking alcohol, stay away from it and put on a guided meditation, put on a little yoga workout, put on a little, like I say, dance music. Music always makes things better. Put on a best tutor friend and read along with me. Farid says I should put my glasses on to read that. He said he's been very stressed lately, but did join some yoga classes. I'm glad to hear that. And it really does help. It's almost magical to me the way it helps, because you can feel so knotted in places you don't even know are tight. And then they, or in guided meditation, they do the same thing. They'll do what they call a body scan, where you're bringing air and oxygen to different parts of your body, and you're aware of where you're carrying this tension and the stress or the anxiety, in the pit of your tummy, you're fearful or you're worried. So I'm just all about good mental health, and I'm really believe in talking about mental health. It's not something to be ashamed of. We do get depressed. It is a chemical imbalance in our bodies, just like our heart gets plaque in the bloodstream, not the heart, but the cholesterol, which causes a heart attack. Just like the brain has an aneurysm, causes a stroke. I'm not so good at all that math, but you know what I'm trying to say. I have to have my glasses to see. Mubdir, you're a new name for me. Well done to you too. So just keep doing it, Farid. And let's see what exciting ending we're getting to with Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. In the black prison of the Conciergerie, the doomed of the day awaited their fate. They were in number as the weeks of the year, 52. So that's our chapter title. 52 were to roll that afternoon on the life tide of the city to the boundless everlasting sea. Before their cells were quit of them, new occupants were appointed. So before they were even out, new people were replacing them. So this murderous rage is just going on and on and on. The blood that was to mingle with theirs tomorrow was already set apart. 212 were told off. From the farmer general of 70, whose riches could not buy his life, to the seamstress of 20, whose poverty and obscurity could not save her. So neighbors turned in neighbors. If you don't know a lot about the French Revolution, it was called the Bloody Reign of Terror. Physical diseases engendered in the vices and neglects of men will seize on victims of all degrees, and the frightful moral disorder born of unspeakable suffering, intolerable oppression, and heartless indifference smote equally without distinction. Charles Darnay, alone in a cell, had sustained himself with no flattering delusion since he came to it from tribunal. In every line of the narrative he had heard his condemnation. He had fully comprehended that no personal influence could possibly save him, that he was virtually sentenced by the millions, and that units could avail him nothing. Nevertheless, it was not easy, with the face of his beloved wife fresh before him, to compose his mind to what it must bear. His hold on life was strong, and it was very hard to loosen. By gradual efforts and degrees, unclosed a little here, it clenched the tighter there, and when he brought his strength to bear on that hand and it yielded, this was closed again. There was a hurry, too, in all his thoughts, a turbulent and a heated working of his heart that contended against resignation. If for a moment he did feel resigned, then his wife and child, who had to live after him, seemed to protest and to make it a selfish thing. So he feels compelled to fight against this inevitable death. But he's just like, I've gotta keep searching for a solution, a way to live. But all this was at first. Before long, the consideration that there was no disgrace in the fate he must meet, and that numbers went the same road wrongfully and trod it firmly every day, sprang up to stimulate him. Next followed the thought that much of the future peace of mind enjoyable by the dear ones depended on his quiet fortitude. So by degrees he calmed into the better state when he could raise his thoughts much higher and draw comfort down. Hey, Kelly. Before it had set in dark on the night of his condemnation, he had traveled thus far on his last way. Being allowed to purchase the means of writing and a light, he sat down to write until such time as the prison lamps should be extinguished. He wrote a long letter to Lucy, showing her that he had known nothing of her father's imprisonment until he had heard of it from herself, and that he had been as ignorant as she of his father's and uncle's responsibility of that misery until the paper had been read. He had already explained to her that his concealment from herself of the name he had relinquished was the one condition, fully understandable now, that her father had attached to the betrothal, and was the one promise he had still exacted on the morning of the marriage. He entreated, y'all remember that part that Dr. Manette said, I don't want to hear your true name until you get married. And then on the wedding day, he had to go and tell him the whole story. And remember, Dr. Manette changed dramatically. He went back to being that catatonic state. So now he's going to kind of tell his side of it. He entreated her, for her father's sake, never to seek to know whether her father had become oblivious of the existence of the paper or had it recalled to him, for the moment or for the good. By the story of the tower on that old Sunday under the dear old plane tree in the garden, if he had preserved any definite remembrance of it, there could be no doubt that he had supposed it destroyed with the Bastille. When he had found no mention of it among the relics of prisoners which the populace had discovered there, and which had been described to all the world, he besought her, though he added that he knew it was needless, to console her father, by impressing him through every tender means she could think of, with the truth that he had done nothing for which he could justly reproach himself, but had uniformly forgotten himself for their joint sakes. Next to her preservation of his own last grateful love and blessing, and her overcoming of her sorrow, to devote herself to their dear child, he adjured her, as they would meet in heaven, to comfort her father. To her father himself, he wrote in the same strain, but he told her father that he expressly confided his wife and child to his care, and he told him this very strongly, with the hope of rousing him from any despondency or dangerous retrospect towards which he saw he might be tending. So all he can think to do is send last words to make all of this right. Like, I don't blame the father. Please, Father, take care of my children and my wife and my daughter. I see Lucy as a child. And he writes to Lucy, that he didn't know anything. All of this was a surprise to him. So he's trying to put those last words together. To Mr. Lorry, he commended them all. He says, please take care of all of these people, and explained his worldly affairs. That done, with many added sentences of grateful friendship and warm attachment, all was done. He never thought of Garton. His mind was so full of the others that he never once thought of him. He had time to finish those letters before the lights were put out. When he lay down on his straw bed, he thought he had done with this world, but it beckoned him back in his sleep and showed itself in shining forms, free and happy, back in the old house in Soho, though it had nothing in it like the real house. Unaccountably released and light of heart, he was with Lucy again. And she told him it was all a dream, and he had never gone away. A pause of forgetfulness, and then he had even suffered and had come back to her, dead and at peace, and yet there was no difference in him. Another pause of oblivion, and he woke in the somber morning, unconscious where he was or what had happened, until it flashed upon his mind, "This is the day of my death." Thus had he come through the hours, to the day when the 52 heads were to fall. And now, while he was composed and hoped that he would meet the end with quiet heroism, a new action began in his waking thoughts, which was very difficult to master. He had never seen the instrument that was to terminate his life. How high it was from the ground, how many steps it had, where he would be stood, how he would be touched, whether the touching hands would be dyed red, which way his face would be turned, whether he would be the first or might be the last. These and many similar questions, in no wise directed by his will, obtruded themselves over and over again countless times. Imagine this reminds me of A Lesson Before Dying, where they're facing that execution. I always wonder, like he said, will I be a hero? And then he begins to think about all the logistics, each step, like will their hands be covered in blood? Will I see that? Will they turn me a certain way? Is it a long walk? Will I be scared? Like he starts to ponder, and he's trying not to think about it, but he's going through all the steps of what this last moment will be like. He was conscious of no fear. Rather, they originated in a strange, besetting desire to know what to do when the time came, a desire gigantically disproportionate to the few split moments to which it referred, a wondering that was more like the wondering of some other spirit than his own. The hours went on as he walked to and fro, and the clock struck, the numbers he could not hear again. 9 gone forever. 10 gone forever. 11 gone forever. 12 coming on to pass away. After a hard contest with that eccentric action of thought which had at last perplexed him, he got the better of it. He walked up and down, softly repeating their names to himself. The worst of the strife was over. He could walk up and down, free from distracting fancies, praying for himself and for them. 12 gone forever. He had been apprised that the final hour was there, and he knew he would be summoned sometime earlier, inasmuch as the tumbrils jolted heavily and slowly through the streets. Therefore, he resolved to keep 2 before his mind as the hour, and so to strengthen himself in the interval that he might be able, after that time, to strengthen others. Walking regularly to and fro with his arms folded on his breast, a very different man from the prisoner who had walked to and fro at La Force. He heard one struck away from him without surprise. The hour had measured like most other hours. Devotedly thankful to heaven for his recovered self-possession, he thought, there is but another now, and turned to walk again. Footsteps in the stone passage outside the door. He stopped. The key was put in the lock and turned. Before the door was opened, or as it was opened, a man said in a low voice in English, "He has never seen me here. I have kept out of his way. Go you in alone. I wait near. Lose no time." The door was quickly opened and closed, and there stood before him face to face, quiet, intent upon him, with the light of a smile on his features and a cautionary finger on his lip, Sidney Carton. There is our man. What's he there doing? I know. What's he doing there? What's he there doing? I just realized what I said. There was something so bright and remarkable in his look that for the first moment the prisoner misdoubted him to be an apparition of his own imagining, like a ghost. But he spoke, and it was his voice. He took the prisoner's hand, misdoubted him to be an apparition of his own imagining, but he spoke, and it was his voice. He took the prisoner's hand, and it was his real grasp. Of all the people upon earth, you least expected to see me, he said. I could not believe it to be you. I can scarcely believe it now. You are not. The apprehension came suddenly into his mind. A prisoner? No, I'm accidentally possessed of a power over one of the keepers here, and in virtue of it, I stand before you. I come from her, your wife, dear Darnay. The prisoner wrung his hand. I bring you a request from her. What is it? A most earnest, pressing, and emphatic entreaty addressed to you in the most pathetic tones of the voice so dear to you that you will remember. The prisoner turned his face partly aside. You have no time to ask me why I bring it or what it means. I have no time to tell you. You must comply with it. Take off those boots you wear and draw on these of mine. There was a chair against the wall of the cell behind the prisoner. Carton, pressing forward, had already, with the speed of lightning, got him down into it and stood over him barefoot. Draw on those boots of mine. Put your hands to them. Put your will to them. Quick. Carton, there's no escaping from this place. It can never be done. You will only die with me. It is madness. It would be madness if I ask you to escape. But do I? When I ask you to pass out that door, tell me it is madness and remain here. Change that cravat of this of mine, that coat of this of mine. While you do it, let me take this ribbon from your hair and shake out your hair like this of mine. He's trading clothes with him. With wonderful quickness and with the strength both of will and action that appeared quite supernatural, he forged all these changes upon him. Special shout out to anybody that has already figured this out. No cheating. I like to figure things out, but we're getting lots of clues. Carton, dear Carton, this is madness. It cannot be accomplished. It never can be done. It has been attempted and has always failed. I implore you not to add your death to the bitterness of mine. Do I ask you, my dear Darnay, to pass the door? When I ask that, refuse. There are pen and ink and paper on this table. Is your hand steady enough to write? It is when you came in. Steady it again and write what I shall dictate. Quick, friend, quick. Pressing his hand to his bewildered head, Darnay sat at the table. Carton, with his right hand in his breast, stood close beside him. Write exactly as I speak. To whom do I address it? To no one. Carton still had his hand in his breast. Do I date it? No. The prisoner looked up at each question. Carton, standing over him with his hand in his breast, looked down. If you remember, said Carton, dictating, the words that passed between us long ago, you will readily comprehend this when you see it. You do remember them, I know. It is not your nature to forget them. He was drawing his hand from his breast, the prisoner chancing to look up in his... So who did he just write to? Who did he tell long ago to remember something, to remember it all her life? Her life. You know who it is. The hand stopped, closing upon something. Have you written, forget them? Carton asked. I have. Is it a weapon in your hand? No, I'm not armed. What is it in your hand? You shall know directly. So he's had his hand in his coat pocket. You shall know directly. Write on, but there are a few words more, he dictated. I am thankful that the time has come when I can prove them. That I do so is no subject for regret or grief. As he said these words with his eyes fixed on the writer, his hand slowly and softly moved down close to the writer's face. The pen dropped from Darnay's fingers on the table, and he looked upon him vacantly. What vapor is that? He asked. Vapor? Something that crossed me. I'm conscious of nothing. There can be nothing here. Take up the pen and finish. Hurry, hurry. As if his memory were impaired or his faculties disordered, the prisoner made an effort to rally his attention. As he looked at Carton with clouded eyes and with an altered manner of breathing, Carton, his hand again in his breast, looked steadily at him. Hurry, hurry. The prisoner bent over the paper once more. If it had been otherwise, Carton's hand was again watchfully and softly stealing down. I never should have used the longer opportunity. If it had been otherwise, the hand was at the prisoner's face. I should but have had so much the more to answer for. If it had been otherwise, Carton looked at the pen and saw it was trailing off into unintelligible signs. So remember, Carton went to a pharmacist, and then the pharmacist warned him, do you know how to use this? So we know he'd gotten some kind of chemical. And now there was a strong smell, and now Darnay is like passing out. So we know that he went to the pharmacy and got some kind of, ether, or I don't know what the olden time stuff was that's going to knock him out. Carton's hand moved back to his breast no more. The prisoner sprang up with a reproachful look, but Carton's hand was close and firm at his nostrils, and Carton's left arm caught him around the waist. For a few seconds, he faintly struggled with the man who had come to lay down his life for him, but within a minute or so, he was stretched insensible on the ground. Quickly, but with hands as true to the purpose as his heart was, Carton dressed himself in the clothes the prisoner had laid aside, combed back his hair, and tied it with the ribbon the prisoner had worn. Then he softly called, "Enter there, come in," and the spy presented himself. "You see," said Carton, looking up as he kneeled on one knee beside the insensible figure, putting the paper in the breast, "is your hazard very great?" "Mr. Carton," the spy answered with a timid snap of his fingers, "my hazard is not that. In the thick of business here, if you are true to the whole of your bargain, don't fear me. I will be true to the death." So what is Sidney Carton up to? Surely y'all have figured it out now, right? I'm going to just keep reading because I want to let y'all find it for yourselves. "You must be, Mr. Carton. If the tale of 52 is to be right, being made right by you in that dress, I shall have no fear. Have no fear. I shall soon be out of the way of harming you, and the rest will soon be far from here, please God. Now get assistance and take me to the coach." "You?" said the spy nervously. "Him, man, with whom I have exchanged. You go out at the gate by which you brought me in?" "Of course. I was weak and faint when you brought me in, and I'm fainter now you take me out. The parting interview has overpowered me. Such a thing has happened here often and too often. Your life is in your own hands. Quick, call assistance." He said, you're going to be carrying this guy out, and your story is going to be that Carton was overcome with grief when he said goodbye to Darnay. And so he's passed out. "You swear not to betray me?" said the trembling spy as he paused for a last moment. Man, returned Carton, stamping his foot. "Have I sworn by no solemn vow already to go through with this, that you waste the precious moments now? Take him yourself to the courtyard you know of. Place him yourself in the carriage. Show him yourself to Mr. Lorry. Tell him yourself to give him no restorative but air, and to remember my words of last night and his promise of last night, and drive away." The spy withdrew, and Carton seated himself at the table, resting his forehead on his hands. The spy returned immediately with 2 men. "How then," said one of them, contemplating the fallen figure, "so afflicted to find that his friend has drawn a prize in the lottery of Saint Guillotine?" "A good patriot," said the other, "could hardly have been more afflicted if the aristocrat had drawn a blank." They raised the unconscious figure, placed it on a livery they had brought to the door, and bent to carry it away. "The time is short, Evrémonde," said the spy in a warning voice. "Thanks, Kelly. Take care of yourself." "Be careful, my friend. I entreat you, and leave me. Perfect timing." "Come then, my children," said Barsad. So the spy Barsad helped them. "Lift him and come away." The door closed, and Carton was left alone. Straining his powers of listening to the utmost, he listened for any sound that might denote suspicion or alarm. There was none. Keys turned, doors clashed, footsteps passed along distant passages. No cry was raised or hurry made that seemed unusual. Breathing more freely in a little while, he sat down at the table and listened again until the clock struck 2. Sounds that he was not afraid of, for he divined their meaning, then began to be audible. Several doors were opened in succession, and finally his own. A jailer, with a list in his hand, looked in, merely saying, "Follow me, Evrémonde," and he followed into a large, dark room at a distance. It was a dark winter day, and what with the shadows within and what with the shadows without, he could but dimly discern the others who were brought there to have their arms bound. Some were standing, some seated, some were lamenting and in restless motion, but these were few. The great majority were silent and still, looking fixedly at the ground. As he stood by the wall in a dim corner, while some of the 52 were brought in after him, one man stopped in passing to embrace him, as having a knowledge of him. It thrilled him with a great dread of discovery, but the man went on. A very few moments after that, a young woman with a slight girlish form, a sweet, spare face in which there was no vestige of color, and large, widely opened, patient eyes, rose from the seat where he had observed her sitting and came to speak to him. "Citizen Evrémonde," she said, touching him with her cold hand, "I'm a poor little seamstress who was with you in La Force." He murmured for answer, "True, I forget what you were accused of. Plots, though the just heaven knows I'm innocent of any. Is it likely? Who would think of plotting with a poor little weak creature like me? The forlorn smile with which she said it so touched him that tears started from his eyes. I'm not afraid to die, Citizen Evrémonde, but I've done nothing. I'm not unwilling to die if the Republic wishes, which is to do so much good for us. I can't read that sentence. If the Republic, which is to do so much good for us poor, which is to do so much good for us poor, will profit by my death, I'm happy to die if this helps others. But I do not know how that can be, Citizen Evrémonde, such a poor, weak little creature. As the last thing on earth that this heart was to warm and soften to, it warmed and softened to this pitiable girl. I heard you released, Citizen Evrémonde. I hoped it was true. It was, but I was taken again and condemned. If I may ride with you, Citizen Evrémonde, will you let me hold your hand? I'm not afraid, but I am little and weak, and it will give me much courage. As the patient eyes were lifted to his face, he saw a sudden doubt in them, and then astonishment. He pressed the work-worn, hunger-worn young fingers and touched his lips. Are you dying for him? She whispered. And his wife and child. Hush. Yes, so she recognizes, you're not Evrémonde, but you look so much like him. Oh, you will let me hold your brave hand, stranger? Hush. Yes, my poor sister, to the last. The same shadows that are falling on the prison are falling in that same hour of the early afternoon on the barrier with a crowd about it. When a coach going out of Paris drives up to be examined, who goes there? Whom have we within? Papers. The papers are handed out and read. Alexandre Manette, physician, French. Which is he? This is he. This helpless, inarticulately murmuring, wandering old man pointed out. Apparently, the citizen doctor is not in his right mind. The revolution fever will have been too much for him, greatly too much for him. Ha, many suffer with it. Lucy, his daughter, French. Which is she? This is she. Apparently, it must be Lucy, the wife of Evrémonde, is it not? It is. Ha! Evrémonde has an assassination elsewhere. Lucy, her child. English. This is she? She and no other. Kiss me, child of Evrémonde. Now thou hast kissed a good Republican. Something new in thy family? Remember it, Sidney Carton. Advocate, English. Which is he? He lies here in this corner of the carriage. He too is pointed out. Apparently, the English advocate is in a swoon. It is hoped he will recover in the fresher air. It is represented that he is not in strong health and has sadly separated from a friend who is under the displeasure of the Republic. Is that all? It is not a great deal, that. Many are under the displeasure of the Republic and must look out at the little window. Jarvis Lorry, banker, English. Which is he? I am he, being the last. It is Jarvis Lorry who has replied to all the previous questions. It is Jarvis Lorry who has alighted and stands with his hands on the coach door, replying to a group of officials. So in case you're lost, they're in a carriage, they're at a checkpoint, they're all leaving, the execution hasn't happened, they're following the rules and what Sidney Carton, the instructions that Sidney Carton gave them. They leisurely walk around the carriage and leisurely mount the box to look at what little luggage it carries on the roof. The country people hanging about press nearer to the coach doors and greedily stare in. A little child, carried by its mother, has its short arm held out for it, that it may touch the wife of an aristocrat who has gone to the guillotine. Behold your papers, Jarvis Lorry, countersigned. One can depart, citizen. One can depart. Forward, mob postilions. A good journey. I salute you, citizens. And the first danger passed. These are again the words of Jarvis Lorry as he clasps his hands and looks upward. There is terror in the carriage. There is weeping. There is the heavy breathing of the insensible traveler. Are we not going too slowly? Can they not be induced to go faster? Asked Lucy, clinging to the old man. It would seem like flight, my darling. I must not urge them too much. It would rouse suspicion. Look back, and see if we are pursued. The road is clear, my dearest. So far, we are not pursued. Houses in twos and threes pass by us, solitary farms, ruinous buildings, dye works, tanneries, and the like, open country, avenues of leafless trees. The hard, uneven pavement is under us. The soft mud is on either side. Sometimes we strike into the skirting mud to avoid the stones that clatter us and shake us. Sometimes we stick in ruts and sloughs there. The agony of our impatience is then so great that in our wild alarm and hurry, we are for getting out and running, hiding, doing anything but stopping. Out in the open country, in again among ruinous buildings, solitary farms, dye works, tanneries, and the like, cottages and I thought I just read that. Thank heaven. Is not this the same place twice over? Thank heaven, no. A village. Look back, and see if we are pursued. Hush, the posting house. Leisurely, our 4 horses are taken out. Leisurely, the coach stands in a little street, bereft of horses, and with no likelihood upon it ever moving again. Leisurely, the new horses come into visible existence one by one. Leisurely, the new postilions follow, sucking and plaiting the lashes of their whips. Leisurely, the old postilions count their money, making wrong additions and writhe at dissatisfied results. All the time, our overfraught hearts are beating at a rate that would far outstrip the fastest gallop of the fastest horses ever foaled. Notice the tense he's writing in. If you guys are AP students, be aware that he's writing in this present continuous. Like, what's the reason for that? At length, the new postilions are in their saddles, and the old are left behind. We are through the village, up the hill and down the hill, and on the low watery grounds. Suddenly, the postilions exchange speech with animated gesticulation, like gestures, and the horses are pulled up almost on their haunches. We are pursued? Ho, within the carriage there. Speak then. What is it? Asked Mr. Lorry, looking out at the window. How many did you say? I do not understand you. At the last post, how many to the guillotine today? 52. I said so. A brave number. My fellow citizen here would have it 42. 10 more heads are worth having. The guillotine goes handsomely. I love it. Hee, forward, whoop. So they just wanted to know, they knew they were coming out of Paris. They wanted to know the number of to die that day. The night comes on dark. He moves on. He is beginning to revive and to speak intelligibly. He thinks they are still together. He asks him by his name what he has in his hand. So Darnay is coming to from this, drug that was put on him. Oh, pity us, kind heaven, and help us. Look out, and see if we are pursued. The wind is rushing after us, and the clouds are flying after us, and the moon is plunging after us, and the whole wild night is in pursuit of us. But so far, we are pursued by nothing else. Next chapter, the knitting done, which has to do surely with Madame Defarge. Well, do they make it out? Are you biting your teeth? Are you wondering if they'll survive? And what about sweet Sydney Carton taking the hand of that little young girl that's the seamstress that's being sent to her death unfairly? 2 more chapters, 14 and 15, and that's it. I hope you guys are enjoying the read. I hope that you will keep reading. I hope you are the subscriber that puts us over 13,000. I just hope that it's a good night for you, and I hope you keep reading. Until then, keep reading until I will read to you next time. See ya.